Yeah, so warm welcome to everyone. It's great to see that we already have close to 120 participants here, despite being late on a Friday afternoon in India, being a festival, and so I'm guessing that the reason must be that either the invitation mail or the social media post you saw was very interesting, or the topic of ecosystem-based adaptation is that exciting. But either way, we are all really glad and super happy to see you all here. My name is Arjuna Srinidhi, and I am the thematic lead for EBA at WOTR. You will be seeing a lot of me and hearing from me at various times during today, which you will have to bear with. But what I can promise you is that we have an extremely exciting lineup of speakers and panelists. And of course, all of you get the first dibs on understanding what ECOBARI is all about. So a few housekeeping announcements before we begin. Please, you're welcome to keep your videos on throughout the event, but unless you're speaking, we request you to keep your mic off. We also encourage active engagement, asking questions, making comments using the chat box. My colleagues will be monitoring what is happening on the chat box, and there will be a Q&A session where we will take up a few of these questions. Also do note that there was some technical issue because of which a number of names or the participant names seem to have taken on a default name. So in case you want to change yours, you can just click on the participant button and right click on your name and edit it to whatever you want it to be. But don't worry, if you are not sure how to do it, you can also just send a direct message to WOTR host, or our IT team can also from their end change your name. So yes, and we can get started with that now. But I'll just begin by sharing with you the agenda for today. So what we have today, and is that after I finish speaking, we will have a formal welcome address by our partner and colleagues from IDH. We will then have an interesting inaugural session where we have speakers from Biodiversity International, CIFOR-ICRAF, from the Ministry of Environment and Forests, Government of India. We will then look at the potential for upscaling EBA and how some of the work done in Maharashtra has contributed to the idea of behind this Pan-India collaborative. And that will bring us to the launch of ECOBARI, the official launch where we will present the vision and mission and the work plan of the new collaborative. In the second half of today, we will have a panel discussion where we will have an interesting and a diverse mix of perspectives from science, from finance, policy, and community issues. And then at the valedictory session, we have a youth climate advocate speaking. We are a little unsure about Mr. Murthy from NABARD, whether he will be able to make it, but we have received a video message from the next speaker, the Honorable Member of Parliament in the Rajya Sabha, Ms. Vandana Chavan. So we look forward to hear what she has to share as well. And then finally, Crispino Lobo from WOTR will speak to us for a while about the next steps, the road ahead, and finally a vote of thanks. So with that, the introductory part done, I would like to welcome Jasmer Dhingra from IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative. IDH is the co-convener of ECOBARI, and Jasmer is a senior program manager for landscapes at IDH. She is a member of the India leadership team there, advising the country director on strategy, talent, business development. Jasmer currently leads 2 flagship programs in India, the Regenerative Production Landscapes in Madhya Pradesh and Women's Safety Accelerator Fund. The floor is yours, Jasmer.
Great. Thank you, Arjuna. And hello, everyone. Very good afternoon, very good morning and evening, depending on where you are in the world, because I see quite a few international guests as a part of the participants. Just first up, it's just very exciting to have such diverse leadership and representation in our virtual room today. And on behalf of WOTR, IDH, and all the founding members, I would like to really extend that warm welcome towards the launch of this collaborative today. Over the next 2 hours, we really look forward to bringing some of the voices and the experiences that have inspired us to give ECOBARI its mission and vision so far. And a good way to start is always with some context of where we're coming from. So ecosystem based adaptation, or EBA, as we've increasingly been seeing it evolve, essentially has 3 pillars. The first being the participatory governance, how we bring stakeholders right from government down to the very local and community levels towards co-visioning, co-designing, the adaptive capacities and improving those, enhancing those, really looking at reducing social and economic vulnerabilities at the community level, but also the ecosystem benefits and biodiversity itself. So how we look at restoring, maintaining, improving ecosystem health. So just zooming a little bit out globally, and because many of us have been a part of many such events coming out of COP26, we really saw how biodiversity and nature had so much more of a stronger role to play, probably more than ever before, with about 130 countries actually promising, for example, to halt deforestation by 2030. In addition to that, 26 countries also vowed to make their agricultural policies more sustainable. We also saw a 8.7 trillion USD coalition of investors now committed to removing deforestation driven by agriculture out of their commodities portfolio by 2025. Now, all these developments, all these commitments, they really are a very welcome sign and a recognition that climate change, nature, ecosystems, and resilient incomes for producers and for communities, they are so deeply intertwined that you really can't tackle one crisis without addressing the others. And it also means that companies, for example, in the agri-food and apparel sectors, really need to take more notice of how they source raw materials which are coming from these ecosystems, from these communities, both directly and indirectly. Now, this is something which is extremely pertinent for all of us to internalize, given that in India, we know that over 85% of our farmers are small and marginal. And we also know that about 58% of our Indian population is dependent on agriculture and allied sectors for their livelihoods. So unsustainable use of natural resources and the rising number of extreme weather events really need us to focus quickly and urgently on building that resilience. So we are now, and have been actually for a while, at a point when normal has gone out of the window. And we really still need to accelerate the pace at which we change our business as usual. Failing to make that change now probably places at risk, or risks the millions and trillions of dollars which we have invested, but can actually damage our ecosystems and economies if we don't make that change now. It can also endanger the lives of those livelihoods and health of those millions of people in India. And while there have been in our country many actually incredible stories of success and of change, we still need to ensure that these stories can be amplified, that we understand the underlying reasons for that success and plan for its replication. And we need to do this at scale, given the magnitude of the challenges in India and the level of which, in the sheer number of people that will be impacted by this. And it's for this reason that we know that the public, private, financial investors, companies, all have a key role to play in driving that transformative action, in encouraging and supporting governments to be as ambitious as possible, and in supporting local communities and institutions to become more capable stewards of our ecosystems. So it's time for all of us to step up to the plate in that matter. And the initial thinking behind working on upscaling EBA emerged in 2019 when Water, TMG, and several other like-minded agencies started to develop a roadmap towards mainstreaming EBA into state policy in Maharashtra, in fact. Now, many rounds of consultations followed, and finally, a version was shared at the state level in February 2021. This propelled many of us to start thinking beyond Maharashtra as well, and we recognize that concerted, multi-stakeholder action is needed, and it can create the process and outcome-oriented models, which can be adapted across practically all ecosystems in India. And that's the idea with which ECOBARI was born. You will hear a lot more about this from the session with Marcella and in the sessions after. But to wrap up, simply, I want to extend this invitation to join us in realizing this mission, join us in the spirit of co-creation. We are inviting participation from all of you on the webinar today and beyond your networks to really fuel this change. We are all needed to enable, to facilitate, and to implement this. So welcome you all again, and really invite you to participate most actively in today's session. Thank you. Arjuna, back to you.
Thanks a lot, Jasmer, for those warm words of welcome. And yeah, with that brings us to the inaugural session where we have really three very interesting speakers who would be talking broadly about the relevance and need for EBA. Our first speaker here is Dr. Carlo Fadda. Dr. Fadda is the Research Director of Biodiversity for Food and Agriculture at the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT. He has managed projects on agrobiodiversity conservation, in situ, and management of genetic resources. His work centers on the understanding that conservation and the use of genetic resources cannot be decoupled from rural development, livelihoods, and economics. Dr. Fadda, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to this very important event. Indeed, this has been a very busy year when it comes to linking biodiversity, climate change, and nutrition. We started the year with the UN Food System Summit. We then had the COP26. I think several of you may have participated to the agrobiodiversity conference that ended yesterday. And a lot of discussion around how we can make our food system more sustainable. India has been in the forefront of the Green Revolution. Dr. Swaminathan and many of the scientists that have been working in ensuring that food security could be enhanced. But it's also in the forefront in realizing how the biodiversity, how the modern way of producing food is actually detrimental to the environment. We know that half of the population doesn't have adequate diets, being it because they are insufficient in terms of the micronutrients, being it because they cause obesity and other cardiovascular diseases, being it because they lack simply enough calories. We also know that 30% of the greenhouse gas emission are coming from agriculture. We know that agriculture is responsible for about 80% of the extinction of the species through clearing new land, degraded environment, etc. And it's really time to take action against those negative impact of the agriculture. And I think India is also in the forefront now of developing these more sustainable pathways, which would not undermine the food security, but will actually reduce the negative externalities. We know that the way we produce food today doesn't, and the way we pay our food today doesn't reflect its true cost. In a recent report from the Rockefeller Foundation, we know that the cost of producing food, those that is counted for, is 1.1 trillion. But when we take into account the health impact or the impact of the environment, the cost of food becomes 3.3 trillion. And that means that it's 3 times more than what is actually accounted for. So what we need to do, and we in the CGIAR, we're trying to do that. You know that the CGIAR is moving into a very significant reform, trying to becoming one CGIAR, is to develop frameworks, models, and approach that would actually address those challenges, those multiple challenges. We will work, for example, in initiatives like Nature Positive Solution. We will work in a participatory way with the communities, because there is no time to waste. There is a huge amount of knowledge that is available in indigenous people, in rural communities that are managing and are custodians of the biodiversity, that it's so important to make food system more sustainable. And that knowledge is needed to accelerate the pathway of using them into more sustainable food system. We will work to ensure that they are more linked to the market. At the moment, all incentives go into the support for those farmers that link to the global value chains, those that are mostly responsible for those environmental degradation. But there is a lot of opportunities for those smallholder farmers to be part of more local systems, so that they can improve their livelihoods, they can have more income by selling their nutrient-dense, neglected species into the market. We work into ensuring that not new land is going to be cleared, but actually the land that has been degraded is going to be restored. And that's also is an important part, because a lot of the biodiversity loss comes by clearing new land after the old land has been degraded. And finally, we will make sure that there is more trees on farm, that not only the farmers will grow crops, but that the production system become more conducive to biodiversity, to pollinators, to birds. They become nesting place. We make sure that the restored land becomes corridor for other wild species, so that we don't break the cycle of the ecological process in production system. I think ECOBARI is a very important platform for the CGIAR. Nature Positive Solution will be implemented in India, and hopefully we will have a long way to work together into ensuring a more sustainable future for the production systems. And thank you once again. I'm really proud to be invited and to be able to give these short remarks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fadda. I think your points on the externalities and the true costs of production, the focus on agrobiodiversity are all extremely important in realizing EBA and in ensuring the long-term sustainability of our food systems. Thank you very much again. And with that, we move to our next speaker, who is Dr. Ravi Prabhu from ICRAF. Dr. Prabhu is the Deputy Director General of Research at the Kenyan World Agroforestry Center, or ICRAF. He formerly worked for the United Nations Environment Program in Nairobi as Senior Program Officer, Forests and Climate Change. He is a distinguished scientist who has spent nearly 2 decades conducting multidisciplinary research and activities in forested landscapes, and earned the Queen's Award for Forest at Buckingham Palace in 2005. Dr. Prabhu, unfortunately, could not make it in person at the event today, but has been kind enough to send us a recorded message. So let's listen to Dr. Prabhu, and I request my colleague Shrikant to play the message.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm really sorry I couldn't be with you. I'm stuck here in cold and dark Germany in Europe, having come from cold, dark, and wet Glasgow, where I was at the COP. So one of the things that I'm looking forward to with the ECOBARI, and it's absolutely in the right direction, is the collective action amongst those of us who are concerned about what is happening in agriculture and forestry landscapes. The focus on resilience, collective action, is absolutely spot on. All of you who have been following the results from COP will know that while there has been an emphasis on forests and trees, on the whole, it has been a disappointing result. It is clear that governments are struggling to meet the moment, to step up and deliver in the 8 or 9 years that we've got left before we pass a 1.5 degree world and head for a 3 degree or a 4 degree world. So this means that those of us who are on the front lines understand what the communities want, what is the way to move forward in agriculture and forests without resorting to high input systems which tend to flatten the resilience that comes from diversity, both cultural and biological, need to show at scale what is possible, create investable and bankable opportunities so that we can bring more of the investment into the smallholder agriculture, smallholder forest use that we know is essential to maintaining the diversity and therefore the resilience of systems. Resilience is an appropriate focus, but we need to make certain that resilience is productive. My last word in this, and other than to say that I'm really sorry that I probably will not be able to join you because of conflicting appointments, my last word would be to say resilience begins and ends with people. Let's not forget that even if we're looking for ecosystem resilience, it is because people have maintained those systems or are destroying the systems that we have to focus on the needs, the aspirations of people. If we can deal with the well-being of people in such a way that resilience emerges for all, for the entire system, then we're winning. And I'm convinced we can. I think in India, we have a huge number of good examples and a huge, long tradition of managing ecosystems in ways that are sustainable. So I wish you all a great conference, and I look forward to being there either virtually or in person on time the next time. Much prefer to be with you than in cold and dark Germany. Thank you.
Great. I hope that video message played out clearly enough for everyone. And I thought it brought about a couple of very interesting new ideas for us to think about on resilience, well-being, and a systemic approach, which are really important in this topic. We are now very privileged to introduce to you Shri Jigmet Takpa. Mr. Takpa is the Joint Secretary at the Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change and the UNCCD's National Focal Point. He is also the head of India's desertification cell. Mr. Takpa is the recipient of the Guinness Book of World Records for tree planting, as well as the Environmental Hero Award, the State Award for Meritorious Public Service, and India's Indira Priyadarshini Vriksha Mitra Award, the Renewtech Award for the Best Nodal Agency, and the Gyalwang Drupka Award. Sir, it is an absolute honor to have you with us today, not just today, but throughout so many of our events in the past. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor to be invited for such a big occasion, and especially on today's Guru Nanak Ji's birthday. I think this is the launch of ECOBARI is very well connected, and I think the blessing of the Lord will go in long way in the environment as well as the protecting the people. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank especially WOTR, especially Madam Marcella and IDH and other partners for launching the ECOBARI at a time when the whole world is yet to recover from the pandemic of COVID-19, which started last year in 2021. So now 2020, and now 2021 is very special year for India as well for the global community. And given the uncertainty associated with the COVID-19, and collective action is the pressing need of the hour. For developing countries like India and many others, the impact of COVID-19 are more severe then those of the global financial crisis that happened in 1990 and 2007 and 2008. In India, for the Ministry of Environment and Forest, it is always, we are committed to work with agencies for the better world, leaving no one behind. And even in the midst of pandemic, this very ministry recognized the need for a strong cooperation to tackle the interdependent challenges of climate change, biodiversity loss, environment degradation, we stand together in solidarity with the global community in mounting a strong and effective response that secure the health of the planet and its people. We would like to welcome such initiatives, especially the ECOBARI, to contribute to the goals of Paris Climate Agreement. Now you can say the UK 26th UNFCCC Climate Change Summit, the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and as well as the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. India has made a lot of commitments, and especially I was the focal point and nodal agency for deliberating and leading India's negotiation in G7, G20, and UNCCD. So there was so many commitments that India has made. And especially I would like to bring in record that India welcomed the protecting at least 30% of the global land and ocean by 2030. On our part, we have already reported about 27% of the area in protected area or reserve forest or wetland or biodiversity heritage, and as conserved under the Aichi target 11 to CBD. So India look forward for effective implementation of post-2020 biodiversity framework. India hosted the UNCCD COP14 in 2019 and still hold the COP presidency for next 2 years. And India is committed to land degradation neutrality by 2030. And we have committed to restore 26 million hectares of degraded land by 2026 under the Bond Challenge, which is the highest commitment met by any country under the Bond Challenge. The G20 Global Initiative on Reducing Land Degradation and Enhancing Conservation of Terrestrial Habitat, launched under the Saudi presidency for restoration of 50% of the degraded lands by 2040. India also committed to that initiative. And India has also agreed to, and now it is not very officially done, but 1 trillion tree globally by all the countries by 2040. So apart from that, India is also very keen in conservation of water and being as a very strategic resource for country. And we in India is a very in a critical stage in the sense that 18% of the world population is with us, with only 4% of the world resources, water resources. That too, for a largely because of temporal and spatial variability, India has a big issue of water also. And as for the nature-based solution and ecosystem-based approach, sustainable management of natural resources and natural solution to sociological and environmental challenges, including climate change, water security, food security, human health and biodiversity, and land degradation and desertification and drought and disaster risk management. India is giving very high initiative in this very NBS and ecosystem-based approach for tackling the challenges of environment and social and environment and society. And during the combating the COVID-19, India has adopted green stimulus measures, promoting low carbon energy, generation, investing in eco-friendly infrastructure, supporting clean mobilities like electric car, but pandemic has been a very serious contrary impact on the economy. So addressing the biodiversity loss, climate change, and tackling the required enormous resources, and India is striving to do its best with domestic resources, and at the same time keeping in mind the imperative of the sustainable development and poverty eradication. India's goal is sustainable and equitable growth, and on the principles and provisions of the conventions and its Paris Agreement are very critical for its endeavor. Desertification cell, we had been working very tirelessly on various issues. Initially, we hosted the COP14, and it was one of the biggest event as per the record of UNCCD. Apart from that, we are working on a conservation of the Aravalli Belt as a green shelter to protect the NCR region from the onslaught of sand and dust storm from the Thar Desert. We are in the process of establishing a center of excellence in ICFRA, Indian Council for Forestry Research and Education in Dehradun, and for which the DPR is ready and fund has been already approved. And the third point, I could say that we are also working tirelessly on the National Action Plan for Sustainable Land Management, taking into account all the programs of the country, the involvement of all the agency, and looking for the resources to implement and to combat desertification and achieve all the targets, whether it is a land degradation, desertification and drought target, LDN target, post-2020 framework, or the climate change target of NDCs. We are all committed, and that will be contained in our National Action Plan for Sustainable Land Management, for which we are looking for partnership, especially with all the agencies present here today. And we will welcome you for your suggestion, your inputs, and we'll shortly organize a regional and national workshop for implementation of this very project. So with that, I would like to thank WOTR, IDH, and other partners for launching ECOBARI. I think this is a really, really good initiative at a time when the whole decade is looking forward for the initiative and for partnership and for implementation of all the commitment made nationally, regionally, and internationally. And I hope that this ECOBARI will show the light of implementation and people's participation and partnership by the local, governmental, and NGO, and coming to on a equal platform for implementation of all the projects. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. And thinking about environmental degradation and resilience in the context of the pandemic that you mentioned, and well-being in a more holistic way is something which we all agree with and is certainly vital. And the aims of the National Action Plan on Sustainable Land Management, also what you said, sound very interesting and I think very relevant for us to think about in terms of the future work of ECOBARI. We look forward to your support and guidance in future, Mr. Takpa. Thank you. Now we have heard and a lot has been spoken about EBA. I think it would also be a good time for us to see what EBA really looks like in practice. So here is a short film on EBA, and it also introduces voices from the ground about people from the communities where we have been doing work on EBA and what they have to say about it.
हे बियाणे जरी म्हणजे वेगवेगळ्या व्हरायटीचे आपण या पाऊस जरी कमी असला तर या बियाणे येतं म्हणजे इतकं काय त्यांना पाऊस लागत नाही वातावरणात बदल झाला तरी काय एक पीक गेल्यानंतर दुसरं ते राहतच म्हणजे इतकं काय म्हणजे सगळ्यांचं नुकसान होत नाहीये.
Kishan has minimized losses in agriculture by following an ecosystem-based adaptation approach to climate change. He uses indigenous seeds with multi-cropping, applies biopesticides and organic manure to cultivate more than a dozen variety of crops across 3 cropping seasons.
वातावरण एकदम सुटेबल आहे त्याच्यामुळे याच्यावरती रोग पडत नाही आणि कधी पडलंच तर मी स्वतः जीवामृत बनवतो आणि या पिकांवरती फवारणी करतो.
Food and nutrition security is important in an ecosystem-based approach to adaptation, and Kishan has ensured the same. Apart from farming, Kishan has planted a diverse range of fruit trees, and he also rears livestock to supplement his income. Balasai Bangre is WOTR's field in charge of Purushwadi, and he has been working in the village since 2009. He points out the challenges posed by climate change.
म्हणजे गावाला पाणी वगैरे उपलब्ध झालं पण पुढे जाऊन त्या पाण्याचं म्हणजे शाश्वत राहण्यासाठी काय करता येईल त्याचबरोबर लोकांचे बराच प्रश्न होते समजा वातावरणामध्ये वारंवार बदल होत आहे तर त्याच्यावर काय उपाय योजना केली पाहिजे त्याच्यानंतर वेगवेगळ्या आपत्ती येतात तर त्याच्यावर स्थानिक काय उपाययोजना केल्या पाहिजे असे प्रश्न लोकांचे होते.
To solve these issues between 2009 and 2017, WOTR implemented the climate change adaptation and water stewardship programs in Purushwadi.
मग या प्रकल्पामध्ये प्रामुख्याने वॉटरशेडच्या काही ट्रीटमेंट असतील त्याच्याबरोबर महिला विकासाचं काही काम असेल त्याच्यानंतर जैवविविधता संवर्धन असेल त्याचबरोबर परिसंस्थेचा विकास असेल समुदाय आधारित आपत्ती व्यवस्थापन असेल त्याच्यानंतर काही मुलांच्या आरोग्यासंबंधी काम करण्यात आलं त्याचबरोबर शेती संबंधित प्रामुख्याने काम केलं. शेतीवर मग हवामान आधारित कृषी सल्ला असेल त्याच्यानंतर कमी खर्चात आपल्याली घरगुती काही औषधे कशी तयार करता येतील मग त्याच्यात अमृत पाणी असेल जीवामृत असेल दशपर्णी असेल निंबोळे अर्क असेल सेंद्रिय शेतीचे प्रयोग आहेत ते शेतामध्ये करण्यात आले.
If ecosystems-based adaptation is practiced across Maharashtra and India, it can help us to achieve our sustainable development goals, meet our land degradation neutrality targets, our Paris Agreement commitments, and at the same time, it helps to build the resilience of our landscapes and its people.
Thank you, Shrikant, for sharing that film. There are a few longer versions of the same film that we have and a few other documents, which if you are interested, I would request my colleagues to post some of those links in the chat box, and we would be really happy to hear your comments on those. Right, now we move on to really thinking more closely about the potential for upscaling EBA and what is a roadmap and how do we come up with a roadmap for doing this. Our next speaker who will be reflecting on this is Dr. Weigelt from TMG Research. TMG has been a solid partner and an inspiration behind a lot of the EBA work that we have done during the last couple of years. Dr. Weigelt is the head of programs at TMG Think Tank for Sustainability. He is responsible for co-steering TMG's programs and the overall strategic development. He has more than 10 years of experience in providing science-based policy advice in Africa, Asia, Europe, and Latin America. Dr. Weigelt's thematic interests span natural resource governance, transitions to sustainability, co-creation of knowledge, and social innovation. Yes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Arjuna, really for the very kind introduction. And I think if you introduce me like this, it's hard to remember myself. I struggle to find myself in your words, but thank you very much. I'd like to begin really by thanking WOTR as the convener of ECOBARI and IDH as the co-convener of ECOBARI, not only for hosting this event and for getting us together here, but also really for launching ECOBARI, as previous speakers have said, at this very timely point in time. Now, Ravi, Prabhu from ICRAF, World Agroforestry, was speaking about that he has to suffer from gray cold Germany. That's why I have fled Berlin and actually address you from Kenya, where it's nice and warm. I think at the outset, I would like to refer to a point that previous speakers have already made, which is, I think, very important. Ecosystem-based adaptation is used to describe a very broad variety of interventions that seek to foster ecosystems and support ecosystem services for the benefit of rural communities. And I think the way India and also the convener of this platform, WOTR, has practiced watershed development in a holistic way is actually one expression of ecosystem-based adaptation. And in fact, in preparing the roadmap, I had even also the pleasure to visit some of the area intervention sites and some of the areas where WOTR is working for decades now. And it's really impressive to see not only the sort of the changes in the landscapes when it comes to reduced degradation and increased afforestation, but also the studies that we've conducted, they really show that farmers' income have increased of more than 35% and that distress migration has been reduced. And I think I would like to flag that for two reasons. First, if we want to speak about upscaling, we also need to speak about what is there to be upscaled. And I think India has a very, very rich experience of successful initiatives to be upscaled in the context of the ECOBARI collaborative. And second, and I think this is probably predominantly to the policy community, we should really be flexible also when we think about how we use the terminologies, because sometimes we get so stuck on certain terms that we lose sight of all the valuable experiences that are out there. Now, having said this, the session is to address upscaling, and that's what I will set out to do. The previous speaker from IDH has mentioned the magnitude that we need to address. Ravi has spoken about bankable projects. And I think oftentimes the whole discussion upscaling is led from the point of view of financing. So upscaling is used to say, oh, we have sort of a successful pilot project, and now we really have to get in more resources to really bring it to scale. And I think I would like to add to this discussion by saying, I think upscaling is more than that. Obviously, we need resources, but upscaling also needs what WOTR and participating organizations have done in developing the roadmap. In fact, from my point of view, upscaling also means creating an enabling environment. Now, when I say creating an enabling environment, what do I mean? I refer to community-based organizations being empowered so that they can actually use the resources to their benefit. I speak of participatory ways of taking land use decisions, such as the water stewardship program that WOTR is implementing. I'm speaking of addressing the very difficult question of securing land rights of smallholder farmers. And for another, just one concluding example, I mean to refer to how to actually build up inclusive and accessible extension services. Now, I know that all of these points that I've raised here are basically the classic wicked problems of rural development, and changes to these problems don't happen overnight. And that's why, and I think this is where the true value of the ECOBARI collaborative lies. And again, congratulations to WOTR and IDH for launching this really with partners, is we need different forms of alliances and partnerships that are able to address these wicked problems of rural development. Now, the roadmap. The roadmap is sort of a rather dry term, but what it actually has instilled was a very collaborative and participatory engaging process where water, many of you and TMG to a slight extent have collaborated to develop a roadmap, such as a tool really and a joint understanding of what is needed to address policy change, to really create, to awareness raising, and to generate the necessary knowledge that is needed for evidence-based decisions. And the key success factor in this process was the creation of a strategic alliance to build the required support and capacities for EBA. You all know that sort of ministries and organizations more often than not tend to think in terms of silos. And that's why I think it's so valuable that the roadmap really brought together people and participants from sectors as diverse as water, forests, biodiversity, agriculture, to actually create a shared vision for ecosystem-based adaptation, driven by the positive evidence that I mentioned before. Now, I don't want to draw too much on your time, and there are very many interesting speakers following me, and actually Marcella officially launching ECOBARI. I just would want to close by saying that I'm very excited to see what our joint work has led to, and I wish us all and Water and IDH all the best for a successful continuation of the work. ECOBARI is there to address national priorities in India, like doubling farmers' income and building resilience to droughts and floods. So thank you very much for the hard work. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to address you. And I do wish us all a very successful continued webinar. Thank you, Arjuna. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, and yeah, you touch upon some very important points on showcasing evidence and creating an enabling environment, which will go a long way in an upscaling EBA. So now we're getting close to the thick of things related to the launch. We are just a presentation away from that, and to take us through the next couple of presentations, we will begin with K.J.Joy from SOPICOM. To talk about the value of partnerships in taking such an initiative forward. Joy is a founder member and senior fellow with SOPICOM and has been an activist researcher for about 35 years. His interests include drought, participatory irrigation management, watershed development, river basin management, institutions, multi-stakeholder processes, water conflicts, water ethics, renewable energy, and people's movements. So you can see Joy is completely has a diverse range of experiences related to rural development. So, and he's also the recipient of the T.N. Khushu Memorial Award for 2016. Joy, the floor is yours, and I will begin sharing the presentation as well.
Thanks, Arjuna, and dear friends. I just want to begin where where left us and take that conversation forward. And the main message, or the next maybe a couple of slides which I have, is to say that collaboration, partnerships, and collective action is at the core of ECOBARI, or what you call ecosystem-based adaptation for livelihoods and resilient incomes and things. So that's a central message I would like to put forward in this launching meeting of ECOBARI. Next. Yeah, so the basic proposition is that this is a holistic approach, and for upscaling this, we need partnerships and collaborations. Sorry. One of the important strengths of this approach is that organizations and people working on different aspects or elements of the ecosystem, whether it is forest, whether it is mangroves, land and soil, water, biodiversity, including crop diversity, etc., and different sectors, whether it is agriculture, watershed development, land and water management, and various other allied sectors like livestock, fishery, etc., all need to come together if we need to ground this approach and see its flowering. Similarly, it also needs to bring together people and organizations with the different strengths and skills to take this forward. We need researchers. We need, researcher, when I say both those who are in the biophysical side of the knowledge system and also the social sciences, institutions, and etc., etc. We need experts in various fields. This has been said time and again in this meeting, saying that we need people of different caliber, different experts, whether it is expertise on land and soil and crop management, whether it is water management, horticulture, biodiversity, as well as institutions and governance, and so on and so forth. Similarly, it also needs different type of practitioners, civil society organizations, and concerned government departments to come together, and also the resource of the donor agencies to come together and put their strengths and skills together to take this forward. And personally, since I've been associated with this process over the last 2 years or so, I find that this approach has the strength to bring all these concerned stakeholders together on a particular spatial unit or hydrologic unit, whether it is a micro watershed or whether it is a milli watershed or a sub-basin or a basin. Only then I think probably we can take this forward. And I would also say that every stakeholder who's going to participate can find a value in participation in this. If it is a research community, then this offers a new context for interdisciplinary research. If it is a practitioner community, then it finds a new approach, an integrated approach, which can, at the same time can address climate change challenges as well as create resilient livelihoods and incomes to people. And for government, especially Maharashtra government has been talking about a drought-free Maharashtra. I think every stakeholder will find a value to get associated with this. And I think probably this approach, we need to leverage the strength of the approach and build more lasting partnerships to take this forward. Next one. And in fact, right from the, put the next slide, please. Yeah. So I would say that, as I said earlier, I've been participating in this process over the last 2 years, maybe starting from 2020, and now we are in the 21. And the entire engagement to develop the roadmap, which my previous speaker spoke about. So in the process, which I found that, people from research institutes, central and state governments, district and block level administration, community representatives, various NGOs and civil society organizations, people from the CSR community, donors and media, all getting associated in developing this perspective collectively and coming up with the roadmap that we need to take forward. As part of this whole exercise, there was also thematic committees which have been formed. Biodiversity, land and forest, livestock, water, agriculture, and I've been also privileged to participate in many of the meetings and deliberation of this committee, and all these reports which came together have been synthesized and put into one holistic thing. As one of my previous speakers said, we also organized 2 state-level workshops to put these ideas and get critical feedback and things. So what we find today, at the end of what we've being presented today to all of you, it has been a result of a long process over the last 2 years of a collaborative, consultative, participative process. Last slide. So, this is where I'm going to end with. So this is how the partnerships should develop in case we need to take this forward as a collaborative. At the core of the thing that the blue cell you find, that's the rural households, communities, and the ecosystem landscapes, which is our direct and primary stakeholders. It is they who are at the core. I think one of the speakers said that it is them who is going to matter in this whole approach. And around that, we have the different institutions with the different skills and things. I'm not going to read it out because I think we have very short time. So we have, central state governments, various ministries and departments, district level officials, NGO and the practitioner communities, the donor community, the media, and all this all need to put together. And then out of that, we also find there are a whole lot of activities which are been, lined up, which which all connected with this whole core concept of ECOBARI, if you have to take this forward. So this is the type of partnerships and collaboration we are looking for. And I think all of us, whatever backgrounds we come from, can find a space in this approach. I would end by saying that though WOTR and the founding members have taken the lead in conducting this participative process and what we are presenting today, but I think it's for all of us who are create an ownership. I wish, especially WOTR and all the other founding members, including myself, all the best to take this approach forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joy. Some of what you said, I mean, it reminds me of something I heard during the recent COP negotiations. A speaker was saying that adaptation and especially nature-based solutions, this doesn't mean that it's going to be cheap or it's going to be easy or it's going to be not complicated. It requires so much of coordination and cross-sectoral collaboration. So it is difficult, but it is very important, and we cannot do it without this kind of partnerships and collaboration. So thank you very much for highlighting that. And now we come to the crux of today's session, getting to know all about ECOBARI. What is this collaborative about, its vision, its work plan, and how you can engage with it. And for this, I call upon Dr. Marcella D'Souza to share with us the work plan of ECOBARI. Marcella, as most of you know well, is the director of the WOTR-Centre for Resilient Studies, a leading applied research think tank in climate change adaptation and sustainable development. She has worked in rural development for almost 3 decades now, including 6 years in the Peru's Andes Mountains, where she established a local and led an extensive community-based rural health program. Her expertise spans a wide range of subjects from community health, women's empowerment, and sustainable livelihoods. Dear Marcella, we are all eager to hear about ECOBARI from you. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Arjuna. And I would like to thank all of you, my friends, and joint pilgrims on this mission to ecosystems restoration and management. We all live there are different ecosystems that we know of. The forests, the grasslands, the deserts. The fresh water has the springs and the streams and the rivers, the inlands, the inland wetlands, the marine ecosystems, so many. In fact, we all live in one or another ecosystem. And I'd like to quote from an author. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of this author. To halt the decline of an ecosystem, one must think like an ecosystem. And therefore, this whole journey of developing this roadmap and coming to this stage of ECOBARI has been a journey of search that has only begun with a number of partners, because we need to think and understand the ecosystem, and whichever ecosystem it is, in order to restore it and to manage it better. And so I would like to share with you, before I go ahead, to talk about our ECOBARI. Our ECOBARI, and it's an abbreviation for Ecosystems Based Adaptation for Resilient Incomes. The abbreviation is a very nice one. It talks about an ecologic home, because many of you would know the word Bari in some of our Indian languages, particularly the Eastern Indian languages, means home. So ecologic home is what ECOBARI is all about. The next slide, please. I'd like to present to you the vision that has emerged from a group of us that represents a diverse stakeholders. Empowered communities sustainably regenerate and manage their ecosystems, conserve biodiversity, derive resilient incomes, and improve their quality of life through nature-based solutions as they adapt to climate change. This is the vision we have, and we would like to invite you all to join us in realizing this vision. And our mission is to be a leading platform that grounds EBA at scale. I'm sorry, I'll be using this abbreviation EBA. To ground it at scale through multi-stakeholder partnerships, policy engagement, enablement, and resource provisioning, so as to contribute to the country's SDGs and land degradation neutrality targets and the climate change commitments. So this is the mission where we would like to invite all of you to join us and let the ECOBARI be our common mission. Because without one another, we will not be able to make a difference for our own future, for the future of our children, for our country. The next, please. I'd like to present here the objectives and the roadmap that we have for ECOBARI from 21 to 30. First one is we need to develop a broad framework for EBA to create a shared understanding of it and the multiple benefits that it can be. We need to promote the idea, the concept. We need to disseminate a lot of it, so that we can foster political and societal will to promote EBA among the different stakeholders. I think we need to get everyone on board because we are talking about the future of our country, of ourselves, of our children. There is a lot of knowledge and experiences all around, but all of these are sitting in a lot of scattered, a lot of very wonderful pilots out there, unable to be scaled up. We would like to collate this to bring or to develop the toolkits for practice, and then to look at what is actually happening on the ground and to mainstream and integrate EBA approaches into different policies, programs, not just policies of the government, which is a major one, but into policies of the different programs of the different corporates, of the different NGOs, of the different stakeholders. We need to adopt it because this is the future. And then to strengthen the capacities of different stakeholders groups and to implement EBA at scale. As I said earlier, a lot of very good tools are out there, but all of these are scattered. When we join together this collaborative, we would like to come together to share and exchange and to give an opportunity for each one who's doing something wonderful out there to showcase, to develop capacities of others so that we can upscale it. But we cannot take this forward without a sustained and adequate funding for which we would need to look at, And then to establish monitoring and evaluation and learning systems and to assess the progress. I think it's important not just to look at have we done this and have we ticked out these, just looking at targets, but actually looking at what are the outcomes that we are getting. Are we reaching the outcomes where we want to? And then to contribute to the achievement of the state, national, and global goals through EBA. So these are the objectives we have for taking EBA to scale, and for our plan for from 21, we've already started it to 2030 as the first milestone. What do we plan to do for the next 2 years? First, to look at the framework, because that is important, over which everything else will be set. Then to pull together the resources, to share knowledge, to invite others to bring in knowledge, to disseminate the concept, because we need the concept and the clarity of EBA. And EBA here has 3 pillars. The first pillar is we need to regenerate the environment along the ecosystems and biodiversity lines that are there. The second one is we need to help the community to adapt to climate change. And the third one is governance by the local community, which takes care of equity and brings in the marginalized and is gender sensitive, so that together the community can progress. These are the 3 pillars. And we need to pool together these experiences through case studies and to disseminate this. Then to provide, during the coming year, we will be offering, organizing and inviting you to not only to participate, but also to share experiences as parts of the webinar or webinars that we'll be offering to different groups of people, to conduct capacity building and training events so that the knowledge can be shared. I think one of the participants was asking, how can we learn and share? Yes, through webinars. And they can be either physical ones or maybe virtual, which can extend to a larger number of people. We would need to collate experiences to invite you all to share your experiences, where we can document it and disseminate it in your name, and your training tools, so that more of us can benefit. We don't need always to reinvent the wheel. And we need to disseminate this widely so that together all stakeholders can work to making a difference for our country as we go ahead. Thank you. Thank you, Arjun.
Thank you very much, Marcella. And so now that you have heard the vision and the mission and the work plan of ECOBARI, it's time to look at the nitty-gritty details, like who can join ECOBARI and why would you want to join and how. So this is the details that anybody who is sitting on the fence has heard about ECOBARI and is considering joining might want to pay close attention to. This is who ECOBARI is today. The members that we have, the members who came together and founded this collaborative. So we have WOTR and W-CreS as the promoters and conveners. We have IDH as the co-convener. And then we have other founding partners, including Actus ESG, Bharati Vidyapeeth, Credit Suisse, the ECO Network, ISB, the Public Institute for Public Policy, SOPECOM, TMG, and CIFOR-ICRAF. Now, this is not, as Marcella spoke about, this is not just a network. I mean, this is not just a network of NGOs or just a group of ecosystem experts. So we have deliberately called ourselves as a collaborative because every context is unique and everyone's expertise and insights are based on the areas of work that they come from, are all equally valuable, and we need to learn from each other. It doesn't matter if the organization is big or small, the individual is well known or prefers to keep a low profile. This collaborative is for everyone who agrees and who sees eye to eye with ECOBARI's vision and mission and is keen on making a difference. So this collaborative, our collaborative, is for individuals as well as institutions. It is for representatives of government, civil society organizations, communities, businesses, corporates, scientists, academia, financial institutions, funders, media, and general public who would be interested in this. So what exactly would you find yourself doing if you were to join ECOBARI? Whether you come from a science background or are a practitioner working in the government or in different administrative positions, you could offer your domain expertise for EBA-related actions. Now, this could include training programs on, say, an EBA approach to water management in drought-prone regions. Evidence-based policy, is the buzzword in government circles today. So you can contribute to the documentation of case studies, lessons learned, and good practices. You might also be able to partner on new implementation projects that ECOBARI takes up in your geographical area, or invite ECOBARI to partner in your efforts to bring in a more solid EBA angle to the work that you are engaged in. You might find yourself collaborating on joint interdisciplinary research and action research and policy assignments. And especially for financial institutions and corporates and CSRs, you could look at ECOBARI as a platform through which you can contribute resources, financial or others, towards the development of climate adaptive ecosystems. We will also be looking at novel and cutting edge actions that bridge science, policy, practice, business interfaces, like contribute to risk assessment and mitigation in agricultural supply chains by taking an ecosystem-based approach for more sustainable impact. or perhaps assess the investment needs and leverage potential of EBA for implementation at scale? And how will the collaboration benefit us mutually, the ECOBARI as a whole, as well as the organizations and individuals who are going to be a part of it? As a collaborative, we will all have access to a wide range of skills, thematic expertise, and ability to leverage on each other's resources and mutual resources. We will benefit from each other's experiences and investments in different ecosystems, geographical areas for greater impact. And we believe that together we will be able to showcase evidence from different sources, because evidence at scale is what can really drive policy and mainstream EBA. The collaboration will provide the opportunity to integrate EBA concepts into actions, shared tools, methodologies, and other insights with the aim of upscaling EBA. You would also be able to access capacity building, training, and learning events for the needs of ECOBARI members, but also the needs of other stakeholders that we work with. You would also have access to regular news, case studies from other organizations working on EBA. And we would all also have the opportunity to develop and claim responsible sourcing targets from the ecosystems marked for multi-stakeholder actions, whether this is related to, say, voluntary emission reduction targets, or even under the new carbon market issues that were discussed at the recent COP26 in Glasgow. So that is a little about how you might be engaged in, what you could be doing, and we really hope that you find some of this interesting enough to consider joining us. If you are interested to read more about ECOBARI, this is the website that you would be able to find us at. I would also request my colleague to share the same website on the chat box. The same webpage also has a registration form. So this is a glimpse of what the website looks like. A part of it is shown here. And at the bottom of the website, there is a link for how can you get involved. On the right, what you see here is what the registration form looks like. So we just collecting basic information about who you are, what kind of organization or institution you represent, and why is it that you care about joining ECOBARI, and what value do you see yourself bringing to the collaborative. And with that, we would probably be able to review it and be in touch with you in a few weeks' time. So, and in addition to this, if there is any further information that you would like to have from us, you're welcome to write to us. This is the email ID at which you can find us. Or you have also seen several of us names of the representatives from WOTR, from IDH, and other founding members. So you're also welcome to look us up online and contact us directly. So with that, the launch of ECOBARI officially is complete, I think. But this is just the launch, and there is still, of course, a long way to go forward. So so I'm sure that listening to the presentations, the vision, mission, the work plan, as well as details about the membership process, you might have questions. You're most welcome to post some of the questions into the chat box. We will be having a round of panel discussions following this, but there will be time for Q&A after that, where we would be able to take up some of these questions. So after listening to all of these presentations, we were all very keen to follow this up with some kind of a more in-depth discussion with experts from different backgrounds on how exactly collaboration can help realize the vision, mission of ECOBARI, but also realize India's sustainable development goals in a nature-friendly way. So that is the topic of the panel discussion that is going to follow. And for this discussion, we're going to invite Dr. Shannon Olson, who's going to be the moderator of the session. Shannon is the co-principal investigator at the Biodiversity Collaborative and the global director of the ECO Network, a social innovation partnership with a specific focus of increasing scientific awareness, engagement, and insight regarding India's human and environmental ecosystems. Since 2014, Shannon has been an associate professor at the National Center for Biological Sciences, Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. She's a chemical ecologist who listens to nature's chemical conversations across India's diverse ecosystems. Shannon, I hand it over to you to introduce the panel and take the session ahead.
Thank you so much, Arjuna. So hello, everyone. And as you've heard, I'm Shannon. And the ECHO Network is itself a worldwide effort to promote mutual scientific understanding and action in Indian society. And so we're so proud to be a founding member of this wonderful initiative. One of the most important aspects of ECOBARI is that we are a collaborative. So we're dedicated to sharing data and information and actions across stakeholders and networks to benchmark EBA practices and empower communities to derive sustainable livelihoods while also sustaining their ecosystems. And this means it's going to take all of us, from academic and commercial and government and service, philanthropic and NGO sectors, to meet together, to share and to co-create to make this dream for India and our planet come to life. And that's why we're starting today. We have with us some of the most eminent minds across research, practice, financial and government spaces here to put their heads and their hearts together in a conversation on how we can realize ECOBARI's goals. And so first, I'd really like to thank each of our panel members. If they have not done so, please turn on their videos so that we can see you. And I thank you for accepting our invitation and for your willingness to share your expertise with us and also with the audience. As moderator, I will be asking each of you a few targeted questions, and we'll follow this by a group discussion, a little conversation on each of the topics where you can expand your thoughts further. There's also time at the end of our session for the audience to take a few questions raised during using the chat function on Zoom, which I see is already very much being used throughout the sessions so far. And as you can imagine, we might not get to all of your questions, so we ask you to please read some of the questions that others have submitted, and do feel free to direct your questions to a particular panelist as you see fit. At the end of the session, we'll try to answer as many of these as we can. So now, to introduce our fantastic panel, I will start with Dr. Milind Majumdar, who I see on the screen. He's a senior scientist at the Center for Climate Change Research, Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology in Pune. His current area of work is related to diagnostic and modeling studies to understand the Asian monsoon variability and its response to our warming climate. He has associations with many different universities in Japan, UK, US, Australia, and South Africa. Dr. Majumdar has published more than 50 research articles in national and international journals, and he has received IITM's Silver Jubilee Award for the best research paper in 2017. He is currently engaged in the field-scale soil moisture monitoring using Cosmos, which is a network of various surface hydrometeorological sensors to study soil water dynamics. Dr. Majumdar, thank you so much for the honor of joining us here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. Our next panelist is Ms. Sandhya Edlabakar. She is the president of Jagrut Mahila Samaj and the member of the Regional Adult Literacy Resource Center in Aurangabad's governing committee. She has been trained as a chemical engineer, but she's also a member of the Nagpur University Senate, the District Parivaran Wahini in Chandrapur, and the Indira Gandhi Open University's Research Group for Sustainable Development in New Delhi. Ms. Edlabakar has authored dozens of booklets, reports, and articles on environmental awareness and nutrition. She's worked on a number of programs, including Women in Wasteland Development, the Maharashtra Rural Credit Program, and the Water Literacy Center in Maharashtra, and the state level committee on food security, among others. She is honored with the Indira Borkar Award from the MB Gandhi Trust Nagpur, as well as the Matru Seva Sangh Nagpur's Sanskatika Puraskar Award. Thank you so much, Ms. Edlabakar, for joining us here today. I hope your internet's okay. Thank you very much. Our next panelist I want to introduce is Ms. Namita Vikas. She is the founder and managing director of Octus ESG. She is a senior business leader with over 30 years of diverse global experience on climate strategy and sustainability across several sectors like banking, technology, and FMCG, and has a particular focus on sustainable climate and green finance, climate action, ESG, and climate risk management. She has been instrumental in launching a number of green and sustainable wholesale and retail financial products and has contributed to raising over $1 billion as capital and credit lines. Under her guidance, the first ever green bond of India has been issued in 2015 and accreditation awarded from GCF. She founded Octa CSG in 2020, and it's a global expert advisory on sustainable finance and ESG, and it was awarded India's SME Leadership Champion by UN Women 2021 Asia Pacific WP. Namita herself has been ranked one of the leading women in business sustainability by WBCSD and has globally been recognized as the Sustainability Leader of the Year by Ethical Corporation in the UK in 2017. Thank you, Ms. Vikas, very, very much for joining us here today.
Thank you very much, Sandy, for the introduction.
Yeah, we're honored to have you. And last but absolutely not least, we have Dr. Ashok Dalwai. He is the CEO of the National Rainfed Area Authority, the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare at the GOI since 2017. As an IS officer, he has served in different capacities from the grassroots level in tribal pockets of Odisha to commissioner of the Bangalore City Corporation to policy formulation in the states of Odisha, Karnataka, and the GOI. In his function as chairman of the Interministerial Committee on Doubling Farmers' Income, Dr. Dalwai has submitted a 14-volume strategy with specific recommendations to the Government of India for an effective paradigm shift in agriculture that emphasizes income security and welfare for farmers. As chairman of the empowered body, he now oversees the implementation of recommended strategy. And he also has a number of other committees constituted by the government and UN entities and has worked on agriculture-related policies. And in 2019, he was appointed as the chairman of the Commodities Derivative Advisory Committee by SEBI India. Dr. Dalwai has always sustained an interest in academics and research and has published several different research papers. And besides a PhD in economics, Dr. Dalwai has been awarded 2 honorary doctorates at the University of Agricultural Sciences, Dharwad in 2016, and the Karnataka State Rural Development and Panchayati Raj University in 2021. Dr. Dalwai, it's also very much an honor to have you here. Thank you. So let's start our discussion because, of course, I want to stop talking and hear from all of these wonderful speakers. I'd like to start with Dr. Majumdar. So you actually have quite a bit of experience with climate science over several years, particularly in the Indian context. And we've just finished COP26, right, where all of these issues surrounding biodiversity and actually what to do about biodiversity loss and ecosystems-oriented agriculture were discussed heavily. And I must say, not a lot of solutions necessarily proposed for them. So I'd like to know, in your opinion, what strategies do you think we can employ using the ECOBARI approach and through our partners to officially mobilize collaborations to reach the 2030 goals?
Namaskar ji. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak in this August gathering. I'm very thankful to Dr. Marcella D'Souza and Lobo Crispino to introduce me to this ECOBARI system. What I feel is actually recently you might have, everybody might be aware, the Nobel Prize, Physics Nobel Prize was awarded to Professor Sukio Manabe. And very simple way, what he says is, first we need to understand the climate change, science of climate change. So understanding itself is a big thing. And for understanding, what we need to do is we need to have the climate information. Of course, I mean, the Center for Climate Change Research, IITM, Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, we have generated a lot of this climate change information, climate projections, and it is all available on our website. But the important thing is how this information has to be disseminated at the local level, at the regional level. So that is a big task. And generation of, particularly in my opinion, if you ask me, generation of local level climate information is very, very important. How we can do that? I mean, this is the simple way is to begin with is the hydrometeorological observations. I mean, at the local scale, field scale. At each field scale, we can have, I mean, using very economical or cost-effective sensors involving the faculties, the students, and the stakeholders. That is very, very important. So generation of this local level climate information and for a longer time period. And obviously it will have different applications. We will come to this field, this topic, how it will have the value of applications, of course, for the science, for the modeling, for the forecasting, and for extreme evaluation of the extreme events. This information at the local level will be very, very, very important. That's what, I mean, to begin with, I would like to submit. Thank you.
So I'd like to follow up with you, sir, on this. I'm also a scientist, and I understand, you know, particularly an issue like climate change, it's so complex, right? So you and I may have an understanding as a scientist, the understanding of an industry leader will be different, and certainly the understanding of the farmers in the rural communities that we actually really want to affect change with ECOBARI will have another understanding, and perhaps a deeper understanding. So how can we actually really coordinate these concepts with them, using science as a base to actually increase these collaborations between these sectors?
Excellent, excellent. This is a really good question. I mean, I would like to give an example. Just, is it okay? I mean, if I just narrate, I mean, our past experience, just few experience. Of course, we have been publishing. That's all okay. But say for I mean, last say mainly the monsoon. We discuss more about the monsoon dynamics. But the monsoon, how it performed, particularly over the core monsoon zone. The core monsoon zone, what I mean is central India. You can take, I mean, particularly over the region of Marathwada and region where the monsoon is very active. So 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021. I will just compare. I mean, very simple. Why we need to have these observations and this information ready in hand. So you will see that 18 monsoon was almost normal. I mean, over the core monsoon zone. Again, I want to stress this is over the core monsoon zone, particular region. And the thing is, first half was very active, second half was not that active. But 2019, as you know, 2019, 20, and 21 also, this year also, the monsoon has performed very well. But if you see how soil moisture persisted, I mean, there is a soil moisture has the memory. So how long soil moisture persisted, that is a very different case actually. It's not just the rainfall, precipitation, what we get, but it is the soil moisture observation. We need to, and not only as a surface observation, again, a little bit subsurface observations we need to have. And this will have, just imagine at a field scale, you have a field of 5-acre land, and over that region, if you get the information of soil moisture layer by layer, say up to 1 meter depth, just I'm giving you a very simple example. So that will have a lot of implications. You can use it for application. Definitely agriculture applications are there, hydrological applications are there. For modeling, we use definitely these things. And these observations at field scale are not presently available. How to do that, how to network that, how to involve these stakeholders and things, and how to communicate this data, how to use that, that is again a detail, it requires detailed discussion. But this is what I want to just submit for this. I mean, how we can use this, how we can initiate the science, use of science in agriculture and applications. Thank you.
Absolutely, sir. Yeah, thank you. This is extremely important inputs. I'd actually like to hear from some of the other panelists as well. I mean, you all actually represent various different sectors, and you also have experienced a lot of efforts with climate change initiatives in your own right. So, I mean, how do you see, you know, for example, Ms. Vikas, the financial sector, or Dr. Dawai, the government, or Ms. Adlabakar, the communities actually being part? Maybe Namita, if you'd like to start.
Thank you, Shannon. I think, you know, to answer your question, the challenge. So from a financial sector standpoint, I think the challenge is to mobilize funds to close the financing gap and match the requirements towards a sustainable agriculture kind of a space, right? And towards that, I think innovative financial structuring, which is becoming quite popular in some of the geographies like Africa, where blended finance is being used as one of the very impactful tools. I think those are the kind of initiatives that we need to see more and more. And also at another level, today what financiers are doing is, while impact investing was there, I think now mainstream investors are looking at ESG considerations against agriculture and embedding broader goals. I think that is where capital would really need to flow. When you're going to ask me my main question, I want to bring in more of the financial aspects. So I'll stop here for the time being. Thank you.
Thanks. I think we'll ask more specific questions regarding ECOBARI in a few minutes. Dr. Joy, what about you from the government side? How do you see the government working with this concept of really what Dr. Majumdar brought up about understanding climate change and inculcating into the fabric of change, and ECOBARI has to really play a role in this.
Thank you very much, Shannon. How do we mainstream this? That's the question. I guess that there is an increasing awareness about the need for ecosystem-based agriculture. The impact of climate change is being felt across the domains. Government and government agencies are getting more sensitive to this. What we now really need to do is to work parallelly and not sequentially. As we advocate this approach or concept of ecosystem-based approach to agriculture, we need to involve various government agencies at different levels. Along with the government machinery, which is more represented by the executive, it would be very helpful to get the scientists involved. It is generally a science or research-based policy that evolves. If we can get the scientists under the Indian Council of Agriculture Research, the state agriculture universities, the CSIR centers, the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, and also those concerned with the Department of Science and Technology, Biotechnology, what we would be achieving is an advocacy through research papers, through general interest papers. We need to create that environment where a critical mass is achieved in as short a period as possible. A policymaker is generally looking towards vindication of a particular idea. So I feel that if we are able to create that kind of a macro environment, we would be able to impact the policymaker. The policymakers at the union and the state levels, already aware of the climate change and its implications, would then be more open to buying this idea. So as a first step, I would say, let us start creating that awareness through various workshops and seminars, writing papers, integrating more and more with the research organizations. I think that would be helpful in redesigning the policies and the programs. And the associated issue is that we should try and look at ecosystem in a sense not confined to agriculture alone, but look at ecosystem in the context of society, which means that the burden that rests today on agriculture in our country, in India, and maybe other countries which are also emerging or backward, where dependence on agriculture for livelihood is too intense. How do we take off this pressure by creating alternate livelihood options in other sectors. But then we must be also aware that other sectors, particularly manufacturing and service sectors, are more insensitive to greenhouse gas emissions than agriculture is. Hence, we also need to create that awareness among those concerned with industry and service sectors, which only means that ecosystem has to go beyond agriculture and try and bring that seamless connect between one sector and another sector so that the country as a whole starts looking at it. So I would leave it at this juncture before you ask me next question.
So I think you've raised a really important point of also looking in the context of society. And so, Ms. Sandhya, I'd really like to come to you for this point. So what considerations do you think we have to take into account for the EBA approach to promote ecological well-being while also accelerating community well-being? How do you see this coming together from your experience as a practitioner on the ground?
Hello, everybody. Hello,
Hello.
everybody.
Yes, we can hear you fine. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I am Sandhya and working in grassroots level for the last 30 years. So we have undertaken many projects in the villages with the help of different agencies. And I would like to present what are our experiences and what we have learned from these all projects here. What I feel, we are talking about policy and networking at the higher level, but what we feel that capacity building at the village level and the village level organizations, they can be Gram Panchayat, they can be cooperatives, they can be self-help groups, farmer clubs, youth clubs, all these people, you know, the capacity building of these groups is very, very important for ecosystem management because they are the main stakeholders there. Secondly, second point is that to have an idea of the ecosystem, you have to use scientific and participatory methodologies to collect the primary and secondary data about the status of ecosystem, ecosystem services, ecosystem management, and incomes from ecosystem. So people are interested in incomes and status of ecosystems also, and management also. It will they have an interrelationship. So it is another second very important point. And these surveys can be conducted by involving the stakeholders only. We have experimented with this and have with a very good results, excellent results, I can say. Then third thing is that people have their own priorities. They have their own concepts, and they have their you know. So these people should be asked to prepare the micro plans for ecosystems management and generating incomes, because it is their priorities that count. Whatever you say, if government says do this and do that, that won't work. If they are interested, then only they will continue with that and it will be sustainable. Then fourth thing is that the micro plans. So I again stress that the plan of development of ecosystem should be by the people, by the stakeholders only. So that is a very important point. The fourth thing I would like to stress is we should promote the technologies which are eco-friendly, which are energy efficient, which are climate resilient and sustainable also. Sustainable not only because of the environmental sustainability, it should be a cultural sustainability, economic sustainability also. Unless and until you have that, if you launch a program, you run it, and after some time, as soon as funding stop, it will stop. So that should not happen to have it sustainably. Then fifth most important point is financial assistance to this stakeholder. If you want to implement these plans, you must have a financial assistance, and this financial assistance can be sought from the banks, from the government, and other funding agencies also. And this financial assistance should be given in a credit come credit come grant model, and along with insurance. If you only grant model is applied, that activity won't be. It should be credit come assistance program, not a only grant program. Otherwise, it will not sustain. As soon as the project is over, people will leave that activity, and they will go for their for insurance also. Because if you want to have a climate resilient plan, then there must be some insurance plan for the people, and how to develop that plan is a very big task, because nowadays for agriculture they have an insurance scheme, for livestock also insurance scheme, but the conditions and all those things is not operating properly. Government is trying too much. So I think this finance should go to mostly to the stakeholder groups. What we have observed, that most of the money is spent on the administrative and other things of the organization trying to implement that program, but very few means actually the stakeholders are not given the financial assistance to are not given financial assistance as per requirement. So that should not be there. And lastly, even if you want to continue the activity, there should be some arrangement for marketing the products from the, maybe it is agriculture, maybe it is a forest, maybe it is livestock. So you must have a marketing linkages. And if you miss any of these steps, the whole program will run for some time and then it will stop. But if wherever we find that the program is successful, there all these three things they have done it. So I think this is sufficient for today, because time is limited. Thank you.
You actually brought up so many different points. I think I'll circle back to them multiple times. Really important points. I actually think I'd like to go directly to Ms. Vikas for this, because one of the main points that Ms. Sandhya just brought up was actually the financial aspects and how to actually incentivize this in multiple ways to make these the ECOBARI realized. So I'd really like to hear from you how we're going to actually get to this resilient rural livelihoods from your perspective and expertise. It really ties in well with what Ms. Sandhya was saying is needed for action on the ground.
Thanks. I think to my mind, there are 4 aspects that are very paramount to achieving resilience within rural communities, especially from an economic perspective. First being strengthening of the evidence base of EBA interventions. So when financial institutions look at these kind of projects, I think the conditions under which EBA works, the benefits, the costs, the limitations of natural systems, compared to options such as hard infrastructural approaches, these often limit EBA as a value proposition or the most liked project to invest in, right? Now, lack of the evidence to show policymakers or financiers the merit of when and why EBA is effective hinders from it getting the appropriate attention by either the government, the policymakers, the planning people, or while even making investment decisions for that matter. Therefore, I think, consolidated measures backed by scientific, empirical, comparative data on EBA's effectiveness needs to be undertaken at speed and very quickly. I think that would then help bring in a recognition for EBA as an effective intervention backed by improved evidence, and also then help integrate it as a as a part of national, local, all kinds of adaptation policies, planning processes, etc., with that kind of priority. So I think that is one very important thing. Further, making EBA financially and economically viable, support of local, regional, and national governments is very important. Local is very important, which Dr. Sandhya also very highlighted. And invoking synergetic interactions among multi-sectors, I think that is very, very critical. The second aspect that I want to look at is an integrated approach for adaptation, which some of the other speakers also spoke. And I want to take an example here. The ability of people to adapt to climate change is intrinsically linked to access to basic human rights and to the health of the ecosystems that they depend on for livelihood and well-being. Therefore, establishing strong linkages between EBA and other sectors like access to energy, for example, would create a kind of a cyclical effect, resulting in better deployment of EBA solutions and then also leading to livelihood security, better education, healthcare, so on and so forth. So I think that is very critical. The third aspect is access to finance. So, access to finance is very, very intrinsically linked or interlinked to job creation and directly proportional to economic prosperity. So the role of finance here becomes extremely critical, and use of innovative financing models, like I mentioned earlier, which have the potential to address inherent challenges. So providing rapid and targeted financial support to innovate and basically to support innovative and catalytic projects would help maximize the impact of this powerful solution on a global scale. I want to here give you an example. The Livelihood Carbon Fund, an impact investment facility financed by 10 European corporates, supports the restoration and conservation of natural ecosystems in developing countries like Africa, Asia, Latin America, while it looks at improving lives of local communities. Now, it provides upfront financing for project implementation and maintenance for over 10 to 20 years, because there is a longer termism also involved here when it comes to finance. And this serves as patient capital to finance large-scale projects. The funds that are received are based on results, and the payments are made from the carbon credits for the risks that are borne by this particular fund. Another very interesting model that is emerging is microfinance, which is being leveraged in a big way again in Africa and Latin America to finance EBA. So some MFIs are working on ground to finance local adaptation measures by offering subsidized loans in return for expected climate benefits. So I think, these are some of the aspects. And the final one is upscaling and upskilling. I think that is very central to achieving the economic benefits of, out of EBA interventions, addressing specific gaps in policy, knowledge, planning, encouraging catalytic initiatives to help overcome the barriers for upscaling, and increasing access to public and private funding for adaptation interventions would, I think, finally accelerate the whole EBA space and the associated benefits alongside it. Thank you.
I'd like to push you a little bit, because I think you gave some really, really great ideas to really get this motivated and going. But, this is also a really long-term process, right? And this is going to take a long year. So how do we motivate these more longer-term investments? I think this is a real necessity, because I know that I'm thinking about Dr. Majumdar's research. It's over many years, right, that we have to actually see this being realized. So how do we do this?
Thank you, Shannon. I think that's a very good question. And, one must understand, and being a banker, a former banker, one must understand that banks look at risks and returns. I think that is something that one must understand because they are custodians of public finance, public money, right? So they have to mitigate their risks and look at the kind of return. So if you look at this EBA space, right, despite the cost effectiveness of EBA as a strategy to tackle climate change, so far, there is only 5% of the global climate finance flows that are spent on adaptation. And out of that, only 1.4% is deployed towards nature-based solutions. So past research has identified several barriers to attracting the volume of private finance needed to advance adaptation agendas. And the three broad categories are: one, lack of country level climate risk and vulnerability data. I think data is a big challenge. While Dr. Milind is doing a great job, information services and also lack of track record of EBA projects returns on investment. So how EBA projects are actually delivering the returns on investment, I think that hinders the capital flows towards these kind of projects and investment decision making in its favor. Second point is limited clarity on the government's capital investment gap to achieve adaptation goals and where private investment is actually needed. So I think that is another area. And then there is this whole low perceived or actual return on investment, which is low or perceived as low, bundled with high risks and uncertainties that are involved that dissuade investors from taking a longer term view. Now, what is needed? I think making localized climate risk and vulnerability data available and embedding climate risks in capital investment planning undertaken by governments, and then bringing in suitable engagement from the private sector. I think that is one of the points. Better articulation of adaptation and resilience goals at national levels, establishing the policies, regulations, standards, also articulating clear plans, including who will do what, where, when, and how, to enable the private sector participation. The private sector goes by quarter to quarter plans, right? I mean, everybody goes from a quarter to quarter. So I think that is very important. And then the last point is on strengthening financial incentives or reducing risks or costs for private participation, because there are high transaction costs and somebody needs to take that, support that. So through public finance, instruments that can be available, like credit enhancements or other targeted risk reduction or revenue boosting measures, I think these need to be brought in. And I saw in the chat box, somebody asked a question on the role of DFIs. I think that's the role of DFIs, and it's fast changing, to come forward to bring in that catalytic capital. And that's how private sector will come into the play and then look at long-term long-termism. We've seen how the green bond market has grown, and now today the tenors are 10 to 15 years. I mean, EBA projects needs upwards of 15 years of capital, right? So I think just getting credit is not good enough, but looking at then bringing in a kind of a participatory model, participatory financial model that can promise a good return at the same time, a long-term investment. I think that is what is really needed. Thank you.
Dr. Majumdar, I'd really like to come back to you because both Sunny and Samika really talked about the importance of clearly defining the scientific aspects of this, both to the communities and also to the financial sector, and also, of course, to the government as well. And I would like to know, how do we bring this knowledge together with science? We talked a little bit about defining these concepts, but also the idea of how do we bring in the different types of scientific knowledge, that come from communities, for example, and incorporate that into our scientific research?
That's very, very, very difficult question to answer.
Apologies.
No, that's fine. But yeah, we need to do that. Actually, the thing is, I mean, very simple thing I would like to say. Even I have been going to school, colleges, and rural areas and all. Very simple question. If you ask, what is the climatological rainfall? Do you have the knowledge of this climatological monsoon rainfall? How much rainfall occurs in your village or your field? or something like that. I mean, and then the question comes, why I need to know that? I mean, IMD, India Meteorological Department, is doing that job, and now it has come up to taluka level and very field scale. But mind it, I mean, if we generate, just in case, I mean, hypothetically, I am telling, I mean, by the end of 2030, now if we generate the field scale level, this information, hydrometeorological data sets, if we generate using, I mean, various, as I said, various stakeholders and students, dedicated faculties, and all these things using very low cost sensor, this data will be really useful. I mean, then you will be able to evaluate, I mean, experience these things. You will be able to validate what has happened. I mean, in a case of extreme events, what was the, I mean, prior condition after, I mean, what is the lead lag conditions during that extreme events and things like that. So those scientific questions can be very well answered with these data. And not only that, I mean, one commercial aspect is if you have the good data sets, this will have definitely the commercial value also at some stage. Now, you know, I mean, the development, I mean, yesterday only we had India, our IITM on 17th November, IITM Foundation Day, and Professor Ramaswamy from GFDL, Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Laboratory, this Princeton, he had delivered a lecture, and what the, I mean, where this Professor Suki Manabe comes from. That is now that institute that has got a Nobel Laurel credit, but they are developing a model now up to this 3-kilometer level resolution. Just mind it, 3-kilometer resolution. Where is the data to validate that those results? And this data, once we have this huge data set, huge knowledge, not only for agriculture field, not only for hydrological field, but for modeling aspect also, for scientific aspect also, it may have commercial value. How this very nicely, I mean, Namitaji has brought out that how we will get the funding for this generating the data. That is we have to assure that, yes, at least I believe, I mean, so many students, so many faculties are working with us. I try to motivate people, and this question comes from where the funding will come for generating the data. Forget about that. I mean, it will have a lot of usage and applications and things. But I say, I mean, at least I'm sure, I mean, if we generate quality data and how to validate that, how to, I mean, put a mark on that, all these things are IMD's job. I mean, how it will be archived. There are hundreds of questions behind it. But if we generate this good climatological, or if we put this scientific data, I'm sure it will have a good commercial value as well. So now these extremes are increasing. How many extremes have occurred in 10 years? I mean, in my field, my village, there is no knowledge about it. And see, I mean, there are limitations with the satellite, with all the, I mean, latest technology, whatever we have. But this, with the participation, individual participation, I think this will be very useful. That's what and once you generate the data, it will have the temperature. What is the implication of temperature on rainfall? What is how the rainfall goes with temperature? Temperature goes with rainfall, humidity. All these things will be, I mean, it will be triggering from school level. Those things will come. What are the departure? What is the difference? Why this temperature has suddenly dropped? Those questions will come. Scientific knowledge, and then the scientific awareness will also go to this. And what are its health impacts? Then it comes. If the temperature drops by 5 degrees, what precautions I should take for the health wise? So these are the things I think. I mean, it has a tremendous application. But we have to do it very meticulously. We have to plan well, as Sandhya ji told very clearly. The planning is micro planning is required very much, and along with, I mean, what she said is very nicely. Credit, come grant, come insurance, all those things we have to definitely. I mean, these are the really good points. I mean, of course, I mean, we look at the only one focused attempt of science, but these are also very logistic preparation we need to have for these things. I think, I mean, I might have partially answered your question.
Shannon, can I just add a point to very quickly?
Yes, please.
What Dr. Milind said. See, when you talk about monetization of data, there is nationally as well as internationally, there is a rise in assessment of climate risks. And when you look at the physical risks part of the climate risks, historical data, there are huge gaps, right? But given that regulators worldwide and also in India are now indicating that climate risk measurement is needed to be done for financial institutions, that becomes a business case for putting this data together. And that is how monetization of this data would happen. Because if you have to do scenario analysis of, say, patterns in floods or patterns in droughts or heat mapping, I mean, then naturally banks would require this data to protect their future investments. So I think that is the perspective that needs to be looked at. And this is coming as a huge opportunity for technology companies as well as climate, so getting in also the right stakeholders together and building out this space is going to become very important. And it is a business case. Somebody, I mean, the financial institutions will pay for it. They have to pay for it, and that is how one can monetize this whole space. Thank you.
I'd just like to quickly come to Ms. Sandhya, because I also see a real opportunity. You mentioned, Sandhya, the importance of building capacity for communities, but also involving them in gathering this data as well, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity there to involve these communities in the actual generation of all of this data that we've been discussing throughout this time.
Hello?
Yes.
So generating data is not a very difficult job because we have worked with the people with SHGs and Gram Panchayat leaders to collect the local level data and with a very simple instruments. And you have a lot of data at the village level also. From government departments. At taluka level, you have a rainfall data, temperature data, humidity data. So government is collecting so much of data, but the only problem that it is at the taluka level, not at the village level. And most of the insurance plan, they give their insurance or this on the basis of taluka level data, and they declare, and that is not correct because in each village there is you need a micro plan for giving insurance also, because in each village the condition is different, soil is different, rainfall may be the same, but the geography and water resources that may differ from village to village. So village level data is key point for ecosystem management, and that can be easily generated with by involving the village farmers and women. It's not a very difficult job. Only we need we should give training to them how to generate that data. And maintaining that data is again a difficult task, but that should be done at the block level only. So I think collecting data and is not a very difficult job, and you can devise simple methods to collect data, but how to validate that data and how how you can just for insurance purpose or credit purpose or investment person, how they can use the data, that I don't know. The financial institution will have to design their policies according to that. I don't know, but we were talking about some risk coverage fund for self-help groups and some fund at the village level only, where from which it's very easy to help the people in case of for a risk management, and that's what that is one of the options some people have suggested. You should have a fund at the village level only for risk coverage. So that is one thing. For that you need not have a scientific data and all these things, but only by just surveying and discussing with the people.
Right, exactly.
We can
this is this is exactly what I meant.
May I just intervene?
Yes, quickly. I want to come to Dr. Joy. Actually, I really want to have his inputs. Yeah, Sonia, just to follow up with you. Yes, exactly. I didn't just mean just gathering data, but actually really interacting with the communities for co-creation. Exactly what you stated. If I can, excuse me, Dr. Vijayamdaya, I've really been wanting to ask Dr. Joy this question because, I mean, one of the things that we haven't discussed up until this point is as how we're going to scale this up, right? And you work with a national organization, Dr. Joy, and one of our goals obviously is to expand ECOBARI across India. So I'd really like to hear how we're going to be able to mainstream this.
Thank you, Shannon. Certainly scaling it up to national level is very critical. We do not have the luxury of resting with pilots or small-scale implementation as successful projects. Given the fact that India is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change, given the challenges of small and marginal landholdings, given the constraints of low incomes, given the problems of malnourishment among the consumers, we have multiple issues which need to be reconciled. So what it implies is that while EBA is a necessity, how do we reconcile that ecological challenge with the economic necessity? So that's where we need the mind and heart and brain to be brought together. At the farmers level, they would care less if they do not get economic benefits from that. If we have failed in practicing agroecologically synchronous agriculture, it's only because they find that in intercrop comparisons, they stand to lose. Those who deviate from the agroecology symphony and go in for climatically antithetical practices, they seem to be benefiting from in terms of purchasing power, and policies also seem to be supporting that kind of an approach. So what we ultimately need is, how do we ensure that the returns from practicing agroecologically synchronous agriculture is becoming popular? So this would necessitate a policy adoption where ecosystem compensations go to these farmers. Unless we consciously adopt a policy where ecosystem compensation goes to those farmers who stand to lose out in intercrop comparisons, it will be very difficult to promote ecology-based agriculture at the national level. It's an imperative. It's an imperative. So one way of doing this is to ultimately shift from kind-based subsidies, which is now the norm, to income-based subsidies. When we have income-based subsidies, that means the entitlements of the people across the agroecological zones are worked out and it becomes an entitlement. Today, based on the kind-centric subsidy, then there is what is called as a centripetal force. That means if I get a good seed which is responsive to intensive use of fertilizers and water, I also get the subsidy in terms of procurement. Whereas somebody in a rainfed farmer or poorly endowed region where he cannot grow paddy or wheat, for example, or a sugar cane or cotton for that matter, then he stands to lose out on a sequence of benefits that other farmers get. So the way is to adopt an egalitarian approach to sharing the concessions, subsidies, support, whatever we call them, as entitlements on an equitable basis. Since EBA talks about equitability as well as equity among, that means the partial favor in terms of the poorer people, I think we need to change the very basis of the the policy. And as I keep saying, that science is very important according to me, because science so far in agriculture has focused only on certain crops. It has focused only on certain regions. I personally believe that science has no frontiers. It is not partial. It is our mind that has been partial in application of science. If we can actually bring the impact of science to the discriminated systems like the millets, for example, or the small ruminants, for example, vis-a-vis the cattle, or the inland fisheries, for example, then I think we would be able to achieve a higher productivity level at a more rational resource use efficiency. And that's what we require. And the associated issue is that we should not be looking at sustainability only in terms of production. Because we have been looking only at production segment and not treating agriculture as an agriculture value system, we have been incurring huge losses at the post-harvest stage. Even if we are losing at an average of 50 to 20% of all that we have produced, it is a charge on the ecology. It is a wasteful expenditure on the inputs. It is a charge on the wealth of the nations. So it's very important that we look at ecosystem. When you talk of ecosystem, not just ecological ecosystem, but economic ecosystem. And that will address the issue of agriculture as a value chain and looks at pre-production, production, and post-production. And therefore, we save at every single stage. And then we will bring in investments, both through public as well as private policies, at the post-harvest management in terms of agri-logistics, in terms of insurance, reinsurance, not just of crops, but also of the livestock. So I guess a time has come in India where when you talk of ecosystem, it is not partial ecosystem. It has to be a complete and a comprehensive ecosystem. That means we start utilizing all the lands that we have under agriculture, not just the irrigated systems. We start using the different subsectors of agriculture, apart from the agronomic crops, into the horticulture, livestock, dairy, and animal husbandry. We look at agriculture value chain and not just the production segment. And more importantly, we look at consumers as a centerpiece along with the farmers. Today, we have forced the consumers to also practice monochromatic consumption patterns. In result, what we see today is that nutrition deficiency is manifesting in the form of malnourishment. So if we are able to educate the people and create the demand, that means we start having demand-centric supply and not just a supply-driven demand. So I guess that we need to look at ecosystem in terms of people, certainly, in terms of nature, but then address it in a comprehensive manner. So government would be at most concerned, as it is responsible to the society at large, as to what does happen to economics as we promote ecology. And I think that has been the biggest challenge to human society, that how to reconcile ecology and economics. So if we are able to find a reconciliation through applications on science, to proper farm management practices, proper larger management practices, I think we'll be able to find an answer, certainly. I know, for example, that if we simply transit from C3 system of physiology to C4 system of physiology in agriculture, we would be able to increase the productivity by multiple factors. In fact, they say that we can go up to 40 tons, 50 tons, 400 tons sometimes in some crops like maize. So we have not yet brought the full impact of science to agriculture. Our approach so far has been reactive. It has not been responsive. So in the light of the crisis of food across the world in 1940s and 50s, we have been reactive and we have been hanging on to that approach. So I think it's important that we come back to this thing. And I would also suggest that the future of civilization based on manufacturing sector has to be on bioeconomy and not just the fossil-based economy. When we have that, we'll be able to use agriculture, which is a renewable form of raw material generator, to actually also going for a manufacturing basis, which is more eco-friendly and not terminal or extractive in nature as it is. So I would stop here by saying that we certainly need to look at ecology. We certainly need to practice ecosystem-based agriculture or entire production system. But then, without the application of science, I would emphasize again and again, without the application of science, we will not be able to find answers at the larger scale. We may have very successful small projects here and there, but what we really need today is a paradigm shift in the way we think, the way we practice, the way we actually treat our entire society. And that's where we will really find an answer. And to say the last word really, under the globalization, under the WTO, we just can't look at one country in isolation. After all, just as two farmers will be competing with each other, countries will be competing with each other. So if another country is able to produce at any cost and therefore dump the poorer countries with their services, then there's no reason why the poorer countries will single-handedly shoulder the responsibility of the ecology and the climate change. So there has been greater understanding among all the nations. As you all said, that Glasgow COP26 has been a disastrous one. So can we create that greater awareness and say that ultimately Mother Earth is one, which really these national boundaries are artificial? I mean, it looks too far-fetched for me to talk about that at this juncture, but it is a must that the competition is killing everybody. Unhealthy competition is killing everybody, right from the global level up to the individual level. So how do we actually devolve that particular spirit of cooperation, understanding, and a more healthier ecosystem-based living? Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And I think you also have the last word. I hope that the public saw that I tried to ask as many of their questions as I can and weave them into the conversation. But I really appreciate all of the inputs we had today. All four of you gave such excellent perspectives, and we need you. We hope you will come and join the ECOBARI family. We'll continue to need these wise and perceptive inputs that you have as we go forward and work together. So thank you also to the audience for raising these questions. Hopefully we can also incorporate these issues into our work as we go forward. So thank you all. Thank you very, very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And now we'll go to our concluding session.
Thanks a lot, Shannon. It was a really interesting, fascinating session, and it's not easy to try and find synergies between such a diverse panel, but you did that so smoothly. Thanks to all the panelists also for sharing your rich insights. I think it gives us a lot of food for thought about elaborating our work and really operationalizing the vision and mission that we have. So thank you very much for that. And yes, and great. With that, we move on to the last session of the day, where we still have a couple of very rich perspectives yet to come. We at ECOBARI, are very keen to involve the youth and the leaders of tomorrow in our initiatives. Their aspirations and ambitions must be reflected in our plans today. So I would like to invite Prachi Shevgaonkar to reflect on what she has heard so far, and also give her perspectives on, her role as a youth climate advocate and as an innovator. Prachi, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Arjuna, for inviting me. And hi, everyone. I'm very excited and honored to be invited to interact with all of you here today. I think I'm the youngest person here, and so I have much to learn from everyone in the audience. I've in fact already learned so much from all the previous speakers and panelists. What I have to offer is my own experience as a citizen with climate change mitigation and adaptation. I remember as a young girl, when I started hearing a lot about climate change, I asked myself two very simple questions. The first question was, why should I care about climate change? I think that's a very valid question. So I started looking up the impacts of climate change. I read about extreme weather events happening more frequently and more intensely. I read about the impact on the Indian monsoon, changing weather patterns, coastal erosion, loss of biodiversity, rising sea levels, the endless list of the crazy things climate change is doing to our planet. But the question still remained, why should I care about this? What really convinced me was some very real faces and some real voices behind these catastrophic impacts of climate change. And I want to tell you about one such person today. A few years ago in college, I met a 12-year-old boy when I was making a film on children and what their dreams and aspirations look like. He lived in a slum not very far from my house. And the day I met him, I asked him a very simple question. If you could ask for anything in the world, you get one wish and it would come true, what would you ask for? I would never forget his answer. He said, I would wish that my house wouldn't get flooded like it did last year. He taught me about something about climate change that no reports, no catastrophic impacts, no newspapers or global experts could have ever taught me. Little did I know that climate change means that flooding erupts more frequently and more intensely into these roughly built slums. And bright young boys like him have to worry about something as basic as a shelter above his head. This I cared about. I realized that as ordinary citizens, we care about very simple things. We care about our home, we care about our food, we care about our health, our livelihood, and most importantly, we care about the people around us. And the reason I realize I care about climate change is because of the impact it leaves on these ecosystems. And so there's two things we can do. We can act now to the urgency of climate to avoid the worst effects of climate change. And we can start taking adaptation measures so that the impact of climate change that is already happening is minimized on our ecosystems. And so the second question that I asked myself was, what is it that I can do about climate change? Now, this was not an easy one to answer. So I went to my parents, and we as a family decided to start from our own home. We decided that we would reduce our own greenhouse gas emissions by 10% every year. And in doing that, we started researching on what activities of mine were leading to most emissions. How could I reduce them? How could I measure it? How could I include climate change adaptation and mitigation in my day-to-day life? When I started doing that, something very interesting happened. So many of my friends, my relatives, citizen groups around me came to me and said, it looks like you're doing something interesting and we would like to join in. That's when I started thinking about how can I take this individual quest I've taken on and include global citizens in this using technology. And from this was born an idea for a mobile app, Cool the Globe, which would help ordinary citizens reduce their own greenhouse gas emissions to a target and make climate resilience a part of their lives. When we released this app, we realized that the real work has only just begun. So we started making simple campaigns about how, in the face of climate change, our actions matter, our voices matter. And those campaigns were completely picked up by citizens. And through this grassroots, word-of-mouth, citizen-led campaign, we managed to reach over 2 million people from around the world. Today, Cool the Globe app has over 21,000 citizens, users from over 55 countries, all coming together to make climate adaptation a part of their lives. My biggest takeaway from this was this, that collective action is extremely powerful. It may seem like, what can one individual or one organization do? But when there are many individuals and organizations like us that come together, then the collective impact can be extraordinary. So I think that's the crux of why we're all here today. Climate adaptation and resilience is an extremely immersive process. It requires participation from every fabric of society. And that's why ECOBARI is such a powerful initiative. I know WOTR to be an extremely impactful and capable organization. And it's also nice that the office is very close by to my home. So I'm very happy that you invited me here today. And what I like the most about this is not a one-time conversation. It's a much bigger long-term association between all of us. So let us not stop here. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm very excited to see what all of us can achieve together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prachi. Your work on Cool the Globe is an inspiration for all of us. We need such innovative solutions and citizen-led campaigns to address the urgency of the climate crisis today. And whether it relates to adaptation or nature-based solutions in general, I mean, this is the way we need to take things ahead. So good luck to you and your innovative activities, and thanks again for being with us.
Thank you so much.
So now we have a small change in the schedule a bit, because Mr. CSR Murthy, the CGM of NABARD, he sends his apologies for being pulled away on some urgent issues. However, we are still privileged that we have a video message from the Honorable Member of Parliament, the Rajya Sabha, from Vandana Chavan. She is an Indian politician and advocate, and is well known for pressing environmental issues in the upper chamber and raising awareness on the ground. She introduced the concept of biodiversity park and into the development plan of fringe villages, and she's co-authored books on the law of cruelty, abatement to suicide, and Green India, Clean India, and many other such campaigns. She was also really looking forward to being with us in person, but due to a last-minute emergency, was not able to join, but she sends this video message from her side.
Good evening, everybody. I first of all wish to say that I'm very, very sorry that I could not attend live for this intervention today at the valedictory. However, I'm happy to share a few thoughts on the collaborative initiative that has been taken by several NGOs and stakeholders under the program of ECOBARI. First of all, we all know that climate change is an issue which is really troubling each one of us. Earlier, it was only the scientists and the experts who spoke about climate change and told us what the impacts are going to be. They warned us as to what are the mitigation and adaptation measures that we should go in for. But unfortunately, we didn't take them seriously, not only as individuals, but even countries didn't take them seriously. In spite of the fact that there were several international conferences, there were several commitments, there were several resolutions. In spite of all this, the countries really did not do much. Yes, it is true that we started with formation of the 8 missions under the UPA government, which are still very strong and working towards being their goals. Thereafter came the Kyoto Protocol, thereafter came the Paris Agreement, in which we have made several commitments. But if these commitments have to be met, each one of us as organizations, as government, as individuals, need to work towards that direction. And this can only happen if there is a collaboration between all of these agencies. And therefore, first of all, let me congratulate all the partners today who have done this under the banner of ECOBARI. On the one side, we have to make sure that that our ecosystems are kept intact, are preserved, are restored wherever they have been damaged. And on the other side, considering our population, considering the kind of economic situation, and especially what we've gone through after COVID, we are definitely under stress that people should pursue their livelihoods, people should have some income source. So it is a great challenge that we have to strike a balance between the two. And therefore, there are experts, there are studies, there are best practices which are happening, some with human intervention, some with technological inputs. But if these kind of inputs are not shared at the earliest with the people for who it is meant for, or people who really need to adapt to the change, then probably we are not really in the speed which we are supposed to be working. And therefore, I'm sure this collaboration will help in reaching out best practices to the farmers, to the people who are very vulnerable to climate change issues, and address their needs. At the same time, we also need to see that the government is on board. Government is on board on several issues. They make policies, they make laws, they make several commitments at the international level. But till those do not percolate to the grassroots, I think we will still be asking for more. And therefore, it is time that we really join hands, which we are doing today. It is time that we don't push these issues to tomorrow. In fact, I think all this should have been started getting addressed yesterday. It is already too late. And therefore, not making the things too late, I would make an appeal to all the NGOs, the stakeholders, I'm happy that you've involved us, and I'm here. I thought, as audience, to listen to what you all have to say, but unfortunately not able to be present. But I will definitely take inputs from the WOTR, which is in very close collaboration or close relation with me here in Pune, to know exactly what are the interventions I need to make as a parliamentarian, whether it is asking questions to the government, whether it is making some interventions through zero hour or through calling attention of the government, whether it is through sending letters or appeals. I will really be happy to be a part of this collaborative effort. So thank you for inviting me here. And I look forward to your inputs for me to make a change in this direction. We all have to wake up to the call. And as I said, it is already too late. We have to make sure that we give a better future to our young generation, to our young ones who are still dabbling in the dark, who are still in the schools and probably don't know what they're in for. So please feel free to either email me, to contact me, and give me inputs wherever I can make an intervention. From my side, let me assure you that as a parliamentarian, I have already been working on the issue of climate change even before I entered the parliament. So, but the expert inputs come from people like you all, and I look forward to those kind of inputs. Thank you again, and best wishes for this collaborative effort of ECOBARI. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. So, I mean, it's a real honor and privilege to have such encouraging words and support from a member of parliament and a fellow Puneite in Shri Vandana Chavan. We look forward to continuing our engagement with her. But with that, we come to the close of the session today. But before we close, we would like to invite WOTR's co-founder and managing trustee, Crispino Lobo, for one final intervention, but an important one, where he would briefly talk about the way ahead and also end with a vote of thanks. Crispino, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Arjuna. Can I be heard? Is my voice clear?
Yes, go on.
Okay, thank you. The way ahead, the way forward. I think this has been the first COP really where adaptation has been taken seriously. In the past, it was talked about, but largely on the margins. And this time, even though results have not been as expected, nevertheless, it still represents a huge step forward from the past. When Namita said that only about 5% of finance has gone into adaptation, of which only 1.4% has been for nature-based solutions, it's encouraging to note that the commitment made this time by developed countries to allocate something like $40 billion to nature-based solutions by 2025 is certainly a very encouraging commitment, as well as also represent a huge step forward. This presents an opportunity. The next 2 years are critical because governments are expected within the next 2 years to present for international submission their plans, both adaptation and mitigation, in how they would tackle the challenge of climate change. And with regard to adaptation, this offers us a huge opportunity for ECOBARI. I see that opportunity largely in 3 lines. The first is we can now shape or contribute to shaping the narrative and the dialogue around adaptation. ECOBARI can contribute to actually developing or evolving a consensus about what adaptation really means and what are its co-elements. This is in contrast to the whole field of mitigation, which has been thoroughly debated, discussed, and generally understood as a common understanding among those stakeholders who are engaged with it. That's not exactly the case with adaptation, partly because the situation that adaptive action seeks to address are very complex, very varied and diverse across the globe and across levels. And so naturally, it will take some time before we all agree on what are the common elements or co-elements or constituents of what constitutes adaptive action, and what constitutes nature positive action. That's a huge opportunity for us to shape, to evolve a consensus around what adaptive action is, what ecosystem-based adaptation is, what nature positive solutions are across all the stakeholders in the adaptation community. The next is we need to develop frameworks and metrics to actually identify, track, and measure adaptive capacity and resilience. This is very important in order to identify those actions which yield or can yield the greatest bang for the buck as it is said, or which have the greatest return on investments, or however you define that. Now, this is very important if you're going to attract direct foreign investments. That is a point that was raised during the conversations, as well as to attract investment funds. And without investment funds coming into this sector, we would not be able to address the challenges at scale that climate change provides in the area of adaptation. So we need to measure and track reliably and consistently, and therefore credibly, the whole impact of various adaptive actions on building resilience. And the third point, an opportunity for ECOBARI, is adaptation is always local. And I was delighted to see that one of the objectives of ECOBARI is to be a platform for various stakeholders across sectors, be it government, be it NGOs, be it corporates, be it academics, and whatever, including village communities, to come together, pool resources, build leverages and synergies to address the complexity of adaptation at the local level. Specifically, it means if ECOBARI can partner stakeholders at all levels across geographies and scales in developing roadmaps and action plans for building the adaptive capacities of rural communities across the entire cycle of their lives and actions and livelihoods, that could really be a huge achievement and step forward. And that offers a huge opportunity for ECOBARI to not only become relevant, but also acquire a significant impact at the local level. With this, the final task that comes to me is to accord thanks and express our gratitude. I would first like to congratulate the conveners and co-conveners and founding members for having made possible, for having taken up the challenge of conceiving, shaping, and launching ECOBARI. In particular, I would like to thank WOTR, held by Marcella, Arjuna, Shrikant, Dadas, and several other members in WOTR who would be too much to be named right now. This caveat I also would have to say for all the other institutional members who have contributed to this process. IDH, Pramit, Jasmer, Samya, and again, there are other colleagues. TMG Research, represented by Yes and Larissa. You'll have to forgive me if I am not able to mention the many others because it would take too much time. Bharati Vidyapit Institute of Environment Education and Research, Dr. Barucha. The Bharati Institute of Public Policy at the Indian Business School, Dr. Anjal Prakash. The ECO Network, represented by Shannon Olson. SOPECOM by K.J.Joy, Octa CSG by Namita Vikas, ICRAF C4 by Dr. Ravi Prabhu, Credit Suisse by Sukumar Shekhar, and equal praise must be given to all the speakers and presenters at this session. I won't mention them because we know them. They are well established in their fields, well known, as well as they've been well introduced by Shannon in today's events. Lastly, I must praise and thank and express our gratitude to all those people who participated in today's event. Without you, dear participants, today's event of the launch of ECOBARI would not be as inspiring and exciting as it is. You made that possible. And in fact, you hold the key to ECOBARI's impact, outreach, and success. Without you, ECOBARI would not have meaning or purpose. And without you, ECOBARI would not be able to realize its potential and promise. So I invite you, all the members who participated today, all your networks, friends, do spread the word around. I invite you to join ECOBARI as members and help make it a movement across geographies at various levels and scales, in the various aspects of our lives in rural areas and even in urban spaces eventually. Make it a movement that can help upscale ecosystem-based adaptation and nature-based solutions or nature-positive solutions across the world. Thank you very much. And with this, I would like to call the meeting to an end. Thank you.